Hello, and welcome to my final project, where we will be looking at Etruscan and ancient Egypt funerary art and seeing how the two compare. So to start off, the Etruscans, because of their deep religious beliefs of a life after death, their art has a more utilitarian purpose, where it is meant to provide for their needs, not just in everyday life, but then also onto in the afterlife as well. And so one interesting thing is that their art is aimed more at this fulfillment of religious and funerary beliefs on a practical level, whereas many other civilizations have their art aimed to be a praise to the gods or be used as offerings to these gods. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, they viewed death not as the end of life, but as the gateway to an eternal existence. So they just saw life as something that could be regained and renewed through death. And so because of this, they started building tombs long before they even died. And this is for if you could even afford it. And one interesting thing is because of this belief of the afterlife, oftentimes the things that they provided for themselves in the afterlife were often more durable than the actual things that they used while alive. Now, one similarity between these two civilizations is the difference of their tombs because of social status. So if you were poorer or lower down in the hierarchy, then your tomb would be more bare and smaller. While if you were higher up and had more money, were richer, then you'd have a bigger tomb and more artwork and things like gold. The interior of Etruscan tombs are often copies of the actual houses, which give us information on their burial customs and attitudes towards death, as well as just basic aspects of their life. Their tombs were round and had long, narrow entrances, as well as symmetrical side chambers that branched off. These tombs had details of doors and windows based on their houses, as well as furnishings that gave the tombs the impressions of being real dwellings for the living. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt tombs, they often contained a false door in which the spirit of the deceased could return to the world of the living if they entered it. Connected to these tombs were chapels, which were open to the public and could be accessed anytime, unlike the tombs themselves, which were inaccessible after the initial burying. Etruscan tomb paintings, unfortunately, aren't in the best state nowadays because they were usually applied directly to the stone walls without a plaster. So they have deteriorated greatly to the point of not even being accessible to the public as to try and preserve what's left of these paintings. These paintings depicted lively and colorful scenes from Etruscan mythology, daily life, religious practices, and outdoor banquets in which they loved having. The colors on these paintings were mixed from organic materials such as chalk, vegetable mix, and iron oxides, and they usually had very little use of shading. These paintings usually didn't have a connection with burial and death, as they instead concentrated on joys of living. Often, these tombs would also have a painted door that was meant as a metaphor for the deceased's passage into the afterlife. And only about 2% of Etruscan tombs were painted, which shows these occupants' wealth and superiority. And just like the Etruscans, in ancient Egypt, the wealthy also only had tomb paintings. These paintings depicted scenes from their lives and hieroglyphics that described their family, their achievements, offerings made at their funeral, and sometimes featured battle scenes and scenes from everyday life, such as bread making, grain grinding, and beer making. Specifically, in tombs of kings, queens, and nobles, those paintings typically depicted images of deities and people that they used to know. The images painted in these tombs were also often accompanied by text from the Book of the Dead, which sometimes would explain exactly what was going on in the painting itself. One scene that is often painted in these tombs is the deceased pictured proceeding on a journey to the netherworld, in which they come in contact with different gods and acquire their power to assist them on their journey. The technical accomplishment of Etruscan art is best seen in jewelry, where their jewelers mastered most sophisticated techniques, which they copied from the 3rd millennium. Their jewelry peaked in the 7th and 6th century BC and has still not been matched, even though they are often imitated. Once again, you will mostly find jewelry in rich tombs, where there is an immense wealth of gold, silver, and amber jewelry. While many of the jewelry worn by the dead shown signs of their owners actually wearing it while they were alive, the fragility of many jewels that you can also find in the tombs suggests that they were actually designed to be placed into the tomb. Some of these pieces of jewelry are unique and unbelievable, such as a pendant that represents the head of Achelous, a river god from Greek mythology, or even earrings in the shape of cylinder that were decorated with tiny balls and figures of animals. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, amulets were often assigned to spells from the Book of the Dead and then buried with the deceased over a certain body part. Some examples of these are the heart scarab, which is placed over the heart under the wrappings, and it is meant to give function of the heart back to the deceased. Another example is the serpent head amulet, which gives powerful protection from dangerous serpents of the underworld and is placed over the throat, once again under the bandages. In Etruscan art, urns that mimicked their actual huts were made for the deceased to give them a familiar place to rest. These urns were made of terracotta and were hand-built, and the firing process resulted them in being dark in color. And while no two urns are exactly the same, they are fairly consistent with design. Some urns even have geometric patterns on the surface of them, while others are just smooth and flat. People whose remains reside inside these urns are speculated to have had special status that has now carried over to the afterlife. Ancient Egypt also has a special type of urn called canopic jars, which are crafted from materials such as limestone and pottery. They became more standardized by the Middle Kingdom and featured 4 distinct designs associated with the 4 sons of Horus. These guardian deities were tasked with protecting the organs of the deceased in the afterlife. So 4 organs were placed into each one of these jars, those being the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines. And each jar was associated with one of the 4 sons of Horus that held one of these specific organs to protect. Overall, these two civilizations are pretty similar on their beliefs and use of funerary art. However, their understanding of the afterlife differ just a bit, in which then affects the purpose of these funerary items.